Hey everyone, today I'm going to give you my top 10 for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle set based mostly around standard. I'm going to also give you a little context because I got to play with the cards in the early access event on Arena. So I'm going to show you the decks I played and that's going to explain a bit my rankings. So let's get into it. All right, this was my favorite deck. It was based around a card that I've played a bit, that I've tried to make work, that I really like, which is Obsessive Pursuit. And it gets the perfect pairing in the new set was Mutagen Man Living Ooze, which lets you pay a bunch of mana, make a bunch of mutagen tokens, which are basically maps, except they only give you a +1/+1 counter every time. And it has the ability of letting the sack for 0. So basically you pay 6 mana, you get a 2 free trample, 4 mutagen tokens, and you can sack them right away, which triggers the pursuit. And these cards work really well together. There's also Mikey and Leo, Chaos in Order. That card is strong. It is legendary. All these new cards, they're all legendary, lots of legends in the new set, which is obviously a downside, but I thought these cards were strong enough that I just wanted to play 4 anyways. This way it can be green or white and lets you put counters. Draws you cards when you put counters. Note that you can trigger it on your turn many ways, but you can also trigger it on your opponent's turn with the Blight of Hex. That also works. It's any kind of counters, so keep that in mind. I think that card is strong. I think that card can maybe slot into the green landfall deck that's been dominating in standard, and definitely a key part of this deck. Next, you have Michelangelo Weirdness to 11, which is another really strong card. A little less impactful, maybe, or a card that needs a little more to work, I guess. But still a really nice, just role player, just really strong card, can really pop off. And then the card I was hating on during the set review, the base rate of a 1/1 menace for 2 mana was just not appealing to me. But that card just routinely became a 15/15 in my games. So I was actually impressed, and I think that card's better than I thought it was. Finally, add a couple Letterhead Swamp Stalker. I think this is another card that could be really interesting in the landfall deck. There's not a lot of hexproof creatures, and you can see a sequence of just playing that card. Your opponent can't kill it, and then you just play Harmonizer, play a fetch land or two, and there's just nothing they can deal. I guess they can try and kill the Harmonizer, but you're still going to get in a lot of damage. And obviously the ability to destroy artifact enchantment when Lessons is one of the most played decks, and Landfall has Earthbending Lesson too. A lot of decks just have some strong artifacts or enchantment. Definitely a pretty decent creature, pretty decent tool. So that was the deck I played the most. That's my favorite. It didn't crush everything. It was I lost a decent bit of games. It was a best of one, and a lot of people were trying the new cards. So you can't really take the results as face value. But I did beat the one lesson deck I played against, so that was cool. And then the old cards mascot worked really well with the deck. It got large fairly fast. Yeah, no, it was a really cool deck. My second favorite deck was Esper Ninja, and after a little tweaks, tuning, this is what I landed on. I was impressed by Dark Leo and Shredder. They kind of have to kill it. It's not easy to block, and it's not too big of an investment. I didn't really get to pop off with the pet. I never used the ability. Thought that card would be pretty strong, but decent enabler. It does get blocked by cards like Gene Pollinator and Grand in standard, so it's not like completely unblockable. But I think that card should be at least decent in these kind of decks. I was trying Leonardo, Leader in Blue. I think that card's too weak to really play more than one copy, given that it's a legend. But I think it's serviceable. And then the Dream Beavers, jury is still out on that one, but pretty solid rate. A little reminiscent of Hopeless Nightmare in some ways. Just does a lot of little things, and the value adds up. I was a little less high on Splinter. I think that card is a little too weak to play really more than one or two copies, even though it was decent at times. The Turncoat was super reliable or solid, I guess, overall. I don't think I ever snuck it into play, but just played as a free mana, exile that creature for a while, maybe exile a token was fine, and I'm guessing there's some games where you're gonna get to sneak it in. And then finally, the card I was the most impressed with, and I think the one that might have the wider applications, is the Last Ronin's technique. It's especially good in this deck because it makes ninjas, and then Kaido can pump them up with the emblem. It's just a lot of damage. It works with Dark Leo and Shredder. But I think that card might be playable, and if something like White Red Go White comes back, these kind of decks, maybe late on Inspector, get a clue, attack, bounce the Inspector, replay it, get another clue. That's a lot of game objects, a lot of tokens, a lot of permanents. And paying 4 for the effect at instant speed is also decent. Maybe against a control deck, just being able to play at instant speed is nice. So yeah, that deck was pretty solid. I don't know if it's going to be better than straight up blue-black midrange. You can also maybe play just straight white-black ninjas. That might be a thing, but I was pretty impressed with the cards. Once again, who knows if it's going to be enough for standard. The tier 1 decks are just so good right now. Tons of standard sets, so kind of hard for these necessarily for these cards to have a huge impact. But I could see, that cards, a card like Last Ronin's technique is going to be illegal for a long time, and I'm sure it'll see a ton of play in a bunch of different strategies because it's pretty versatile and decently powerful. I also played a decent bit of affinity decks, and while I thought the new cards were powerful, you've got Ravenous Robots, which is a nice engine. The Cavalry, just couple of tokens for 2 mana is nice, and then the new plating as well. That card was good. The new Krang, I think that card could actually see play in Modern potentially. You already play Thought Monitor sometimes. That one's 1 more mana, and especially when you're playing Emery, it could be nice to have access to it eventually. So I was impressed with the card. I think it is going to be tough though. It's a lot of 1 toughness creatures. You've got cards like Pyroclast that are pretty popular. You've got Iris Demonstration, which is really good against you. So I feel like what you're doing is not powerful enough to make up for the fact that you're going to have to face these cards. In the early access, it was best of 1. There's not a lot of sweepers, not a lot of removal in general. So you're able to kind of do your thing. But I'm a little skeptical that strategy is going to be good enough for standards. I also tried this cool build of Temur Affinity. Was the new artifacts that untap creatures and artifacts. So you get to kind of go off with Gene Pollinator. You also play Mirada and Urine Hacker, aka Lady Octopus, I think, to put your artifacts in play. You try to abuse Does Machines too, and you still have the Krang as your top end. You play Boomerang Basics to bound the cheap artifacts, untap, etc. So that deck did not function super well. It was not super consistent, but at least I like that it's maybe a little less solid on the 1 toughness creatures and can still do pretty silly things. I think you can do better in standard than relying on artifacts, but it did a lot of cool stuff. And Gene Pollinator is kind of really nice enabler. If you notice, you're almost splashing for Gene Pollinator. You also have Guac and Marshmallow Pizza, but yeah, Gene Pollinator in these artifact decks, these tokens decks, is almost worth splashing for. because it works so well with the rest of your cards. And then this is another version I tried. I didn't try the specific version, but this is a slightly different take. And the idea here is once again to not rely too heavily on 1 toughness creatures and play removal spells, play more removal, more interaction with Duskro's Reliquary. Still trying to get a bunch of mana, make a bunch of permanent objects, but you have a little more sustain because you have Duskro's Reliquary and Tezzeret. Tezzeret can, like, being able to tutor for removal is a pretty powerful thing. Just 1 Duskro's a turn can be really nice. And then you still have the powerful top end as Crank. So this is not, I mean, you can see the mana base is not adjusted. I never tried this actual build, but I think there might be something there, like some kind of 4, maybe even 5 color artifacts where playing all the good stuff, you have the Planeswalker to not be all in on just artifacts and creatures and more interaction. The theory is that being glass cannon is not going to work for you, so you need to go a little more mid-rangey. With all that being said, here's my rankings for the cards from the new set. Was going to cheat a bit, few honorable mention. I have Krang Mastermind. I've got Ravenous Robots, and you can add the arsenal. Basically, all the artifact cards I think are not going to be quite good enough to break into standard, but there's a chance, and I think these cards might actually see more play maybe in modern. So honorable mention to a lot of the artifact and affinity stuff. Honorable mention to Super Shredder. I was not a believer, and I was pretty impressed with that card. Once again, this is a card that can maybe see a little play in modern with fetch lands and bubbles, cards like that. So that gets honorable mention. Another one that I don't think is good enough for standard but works well in modern because mostly of the fetch lands is Rat King Verminister. That's a card that could maybe slot into Goryo's Vengeance. It does compete with Emperor of Bones, but it can turn into a reanimate spell pretty fast, and just for value was a decent clock, decent value. Also want to mention Death in the Family. Solid removal spell. It does things that no other removal spell does in standard right now, so it does have a time and place. We'll see if you actually need it when you have cards like Hex, Trajectory, Shoot the Sheriff, etc. Maybe in specific metas, that card might have a spot and see some play. Also, kind of personal favorite of mine. I didn't get to try it, but Lessons from Life. I'm hoping to try that card in Assault Eye Control Shell, maybe even Bant. Kind of a nice card. Urban Evolution, but 1 mana cheaper, basically. And I think the rate is decent enough that it could see at least play a little play in standards. Finally, I've got Turncoat and Prehistoric Pet. I wasn't blown away by these cards, but I think they could be decent role players. And a card I did not get to try yet, but that could be good, that combo as well, was Shiko and Quantum Riddler. It's Go Ninja Go, the gold white red spell. Does a lot of cool stuff. Maybe a little too much setup, but yeah, decent cards, or maybe a little potential. All right, for the actual top 10, at 10 I have Does Machines. Not super sure on that one, kind of covering my bases. That's another one that could be better in modern than in standard, but there's some cool applications. It can get back a monument to endurance. It's decent at building up the count for your lessons in the graveyard, and eventually it does serve as a win condition too. So not a bad card, and maybe you play it in some combo decks, sets you up a lot of card advantage. So I think the rate is a little too high, or basically the cost is a little too high for what it does, but it's close, and I could definitely end up being wrong. Next, I have the Northwind Avatar. I didn't get to try that one, but it's a cool concept. It's a powerful card. It's not a legend, one of the few good creatures that are not legendary, so you can chain them, maybe play free in your main deck, one in your sideboard, something like that. Pretty unique ability, kind of hard to rate, could be part of some combo decks too. So who knows, it bounces Rolling Dragonstorm, for instance. Cool design, and feel like, it's probably going to see play eventually, and once again, covering my bases because it's kind of a weird ability. Next up, I have Michelangelo's Technique. I feel like that card's pretty pushed. I didn't get to try it. Is it a card that just slots into green landfall as a 1 or 2 of? Maybe it's a kind of card that you have to try and play. It might end up being kind of terrible, but I think the rate is decent, and without even talking about the sneak ability, so I have it in my top 10. Next, I have Michelangelo Weirdness to 11. These cards are like kind of hard to rate because that one, Mickey and Leo Case in order, Mutagen Man, they feel like they're somewhat of a package, but I guess Michelangelo is maybe a little more of a build around card, and these decks can tend to fall apart when facing removal and stuff. It doesn't sustain itself as much. It's not a ton of card advantage, but it is really powerful. So I was impressed. As I said, I was impressed by that black-green deck and these cards in general. So that's going to be reflected in my rankings. At number 6, I have the Dream Beavers. I feel like that card's pretty versatile and solid rate, evasion enables a lot, and just a solid card. A deck like Pixie's been around. Maybe that card can be good there. And in big standards, cards that stay in standard for a long time, I feel like that's kind of card that maybe a lot of decks are gonna need. It's not trivial to come by good 1-mana spells, and I think Dreamweaver is pretty solid on. At 5, I have Letterhead Swampstalker. Not a card you're necessarily going to build around, not a card you're going to play 4 of. It is a legend, it is 4 mana, but hexproof, pretty unique. It has utility, it works well as Harmonizer. Green Landfall's already one of the best decks in Standard, and I feel like there's always going to be a use for a card like that in Standard, so I could see that one being lower, but I have it at 5. At 4, I have the Last Ronin Technique. Once again, a bit like Dream Beavers, I feel like it's pretty versatile. It can fit in a lot of strategies, good rate, and whether you're playing tokens, live gain, trying to trigger Enduring Innocence, trying to go wide, I feel like that card's pretty solid, and not only in Esper Ninja necessarily or Pixie, but I think that card could see a decent bit of play. Elspeth Stormslayer is a really powerful card, so anything that makes tokens, you get a kind of a bonus from that. I was decently impressed by the Esper Ninjas deck. I don't necessarily expect it to be better than Blue-Black Midrange, but keeping in mind this set is maybe not the most powerful either, so doesn't necessarily mean that because I think a card's in my top 10 that it's going to see a lot of play in Defined Standard, but I think that one at least has a chance to do that. Getting to the top 3, third place of the podium, I have Mutagen Man Living Ooze. I think that card's really powerful. It works really well with some of the other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cards. It works really well with Obsessive Pursuit, which is a card I like. I think it's powerful. Might have to bide your time a bit with that one, but powerful card. And if ever they print more stack cards that trigger when you sack an artifact, when you sack a permanent, that one's really good at enabling that, and just a solid rate. Once again, it's a card that you can maybe play a bit in the landfall deck, even though, yeah, maybe not that great. It also reduces the sack cost of maps, of landers. Who knows if they have other kind of tokens planned for the future. That's been kind of a way they've been designing the cards recently, making the maps tokens, the landers, all these tokens. So who knows what Mutagen Man Living is going to enable in the future. And I think that card's already quite strong. At 2, I have Cool Barud. Still a question mark for me. I did lose a really cool game where my opponent, there was MTG Malone. He had Cool Barud, and I thought I had the game locked up, but he attacked. He snuck the Wheel of Fortune, drew 7 cards, and he had the elf in play to just discard his entire hand, dealing 16 damage in the turn or something silly. Even without the silliness of Wheel of Fortune, just decent engine, slots nicely into Ragdos Monument, might be good enough for Aether Lessons, and down the line, kind of a strong card, could maybe have some modern applications. And I'm kind of, my hot take during the set review was that that card was overrated and it was not going to be that impactful and maybe a role player at best, but I've been aggressively wrong in the past. One of my biggest miss is I called Expressive Iteration a sorcery speed impulse. No, not even that. A sorcery speed, whatever the one is, you look at only 3 cards. If a sorcery speed anticipates, I called Expressive Iteration a sorcery speed anticipate, and yeah, I was quite wrong by that one. So still have a little trauma, and it's part of the reason I have Cool Barud at number 2. And then at number 1, I have Mickey and Leo Chaos in Order. I'm really not sure about that. I like the card. It's powerful. Once again, it slots in to green landfall. It's obvious, but it's also a gold card, so it's double green, or double white. So if there's a good, mono white tokens deck, mono white live game deck, I don't know. Just the fact that it's like easier to cast, or maybe not easier to cast, but goes into more decks. That it slots into green landfall. I thought it was pretty key in that black-green deck I was playing. I couldn't really tell you if that card was more important than Mutagen Man Living Ooze. I think these two were the 2 most important, and then Michelangelo, Weirdness 311, and Super Shredder were maybe all more of role players and not as essential to your really good draws. But yeah, I like the synergy was Requiting Hex, and that one could maybe also see a decent bit of play in older formats. So I'm gonna have Mickey and Leo at 1, but it is not easy, honestly. None of these I'm really sure of, but hopefully that was that give you an idea of what might go on in standard. Was in you said was good for me, what I enjoyed playing, and of course, let me know in the comments if I've missed anything. If you agree, strongly agree, disagree, whatever, want to talk about a card, feel free to discuss. And I'll try to read all the comments and answer every one of the comments because that's always pretty interesting to discuss these new cards. But yeah, that was my top 10, my rankings for cards from the new set. I'll actually be playing the pre-release this weekend, the 2-headed giant pre-release, so that should be fun. And start playing with the new cards next week. I don't have a big event. I'm not going to my regional championship in Italy. Decided to skip that one, and the set's going to be legal, meaning pre-release weekend. Cards come online on Tuesday, and people have to submit their deck lists on a Friday. So only a few days. We'll see. It's always fun. It's going to be cool to see if anyone figures out. So we might have a really good idea really fast if my rankings are good, if any of these cards actually have a chance of making an impact in standards. Should be a fun tournament to watch the European regional championship. And then yeah, my next big event in standard is Pro Tour Las Vegas, and that will have this set will be legal in standard, and there'll also be a new set Strixhaven, which will be the draft format as well. But yeah, as always, if you made it this far, Thank you so much for watching. Consider leaving a like, a subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.